Alright YouTubers, how you diddling? This is the Disposalist, and this will be my 7th beginner's guide for Battlefield 1. In this video I'm going to talk about sidearms, secondary weapons for the classes. As in previous guides, I'd recommend you go back and watch guide number 2, which is about how to choose weapons in general, where I describe some of the underlying mechanics and properties of weapons, which I'm not going to keep going over in each guide. Concepts like spread and recoil, you'll become familiar with them there. So, sidearms. We don't have variants to discuss, just the models themselves. And what I'm going to do is discuss the 5 that are common to all the classes. That's the M1911, the P08, the MLE1903, the C93 and the number 3 revolver. Compare those to each other. And then I'll compare like models to the 3 class specific guns. Each class has a revolver, the Gasser here for the assault. Each class has what I'm calling a special, the Howder for the assault, and each class has what I'm calling a spammer, a rapid fire. With the 1903 Hammerless is the assault version of that. So to begin with, the common pistols. So, as with weapon comparisons before, you can see over here in the charts all the data that DICE want to show you, and there is a direct comparison that you can do. If you select the M1911 and then hover over the others, you can see that on the whole, from the M1911 as sort of a base point, the P08 there, you're giving up some damage, you're gaining some control, which as we know is underlying is recoil-like characteristics. There's also an extra bullet in the clip. Rate of fire is the same. The damage drop-off is slightly further away. So the P08, you're gaining some range, you're gaining some control, but you're losing a bit of damage. MLE 1903 is similarly losing a bit of damage. You're gaining some rate of fire, and you're gaining some slight distance, even more control, even less recoil is what you're seeing there. The C93, similar statistics. It's also more accurate, the C93 there. You can see its damage drop-off is further away again than the others. One extra bullet, bit of extra accuracy, higher rate of fire, but more damage reduction, and I'll give you some figures on that as well in a second. And comparing against the revolver, it's not entirely fair comparison, but you have to make that choice when you're looking at your class. Do I use a semi-automatic? Do I use a revolver? The revolver's generally more damage, more accurate, worse damage drop-off. The damage drops off earlier. Of course, 6 bullets in these revolvers and more recoil. So the Simtic data underlying, the M1911, it's got a maximum damage of 35, hence it's showing the best damage of those semi-automatics. The important thing for that 35 compared against the P08's 30, the MLE 1903's 30 and the C93's 26.5 is that 35 damage at maximum is 3 hits to kill, whereas the others are all 4 hits to kill. So it seems a slight increase, but actually using one less bullet can be much a quicker kill. Now the revolvers, the trade-off you have there, the damage per shot, the maximum damage per shot is 53. So from close range, if you hit just twice, you are getting a kill. And that is quite an advantage over the others. The minimum damage for the number 3 revolver is 13.5, so that's actually the same as the C93 and the MLE 1903. Obviously the rate of fire, you're losing quite something in the revolvers as well. It's 164 compared with the C93 and the MLE 1903, which have 360, and the other 2 semi-automatics with 300. You can fire multiple bullets per second. You can fire 2 per second with the number 3, and you get that 2-hit kill. So your trade-off there is, do you prefer to be more accurate, fire less bullets, or do you prefer to spam that trigger finger and fire more bullets? Some other underlying characteristics to help compare these 5 and differentiate these 3-5. Deploy time. The MLE 1903 has the fastest deploy time, 0.45 seconds, but it's really not that much different. People talk about it, but it's not that much different from the M1911, which is 0.55, and the others which lie in between. Fractions of a second, I suppose, can make all the difference when you're swapping to your secondary to try and desperately finish someone off. Reload times are a bit more important. The M1911 actually has a very quick reload time, 1.7 seconds, compared to the MLE 1903 of 2.7, and the others lie in between. Recoil characteristics are somewhat different. The recoil on the M1911 is higher than the others. The MLE 1903 has the lowest recoil characteristics. I say the 1911 is higher, of course the number 3 is higher still, but I'm comparing to semi-automatics. The M1911 has a higher recoil. And spread characteristics, the most accurate is the C93 when standing still, but if you're moving it's the least accurate. So there's a toss-up with all of these, and it really does behoove you to try them out. So just as one more quick overview, the M1911 I would say is a good middle ground, but it does good damage, 3 shots to kill, and still is a rapid fire gun. The P08 is more accurate, the muzzle velocity is higher, it's got 1 more bullet. It's just the same speed, but it's 4 shots to kill at distance. The MLE 1903, you are further losing some damage, the minimum damage being lower, but you're gaining some speed. It's still pretty accurate, and it has less recoil than the others. The C93, you're further losing damage, but it's got the highest velocity, perhaps the most accurate. And the number 3 revolver, the toss-up, is always, it's much slower, it has 6 bullets, but it's 2 shots to kill at close range. So I'm going to compare the class-specific weapons now against their normal equivalent, their common equivalents. And first up is the Gasser M1870 against the number 3 revolver. You can see from the stats over here on the right, the Gasser there, more damage, more accurate, maybe slightly less control. I'll talk about the underlying figures for that. The rate of fire is reduced, but the damage drop off there you can see is considerably better for the gas, double the distance before it drops off. And that's the reason it gets a better damage rating there too, because the maximum damage is the same, 53, but if the damage drop off before it loses that maximum is further, then that's good. The minimum damage is also 21 against 13.5, so even when that damage drops off you're still doing more damage. 21 of course is 5 shots to kill at distance, 6 for the number 3. Not that you'll be killing people at distance very often with a sidearm. As I said, the other differences: rate of fire is slightly quicker, not much. Muzzle velocity slightly higher, not much. Deploy time slightly worse, but not much. Big difference for this Gasser is it reloads 1 bullet at a time, and you get this with a couple of the sidearms. That's only a pain really if you find yourself using a sidearm regularly. If you're using it in an emergency and you're firing off those 6 and you've got time then to reload before you have to use it again in an emergency, that's fine, but that reload really is very slow, 1 bullet at a time. So that is the Gasser. Oh, just additionally, it also has a worse control stat there. You can see it's because it's got a bit of a recoil when it fires, a bit of a kick when it fires. So next up is the class special, the Howder pistol, and this also compares to the other revolvers most closely, but you can see it does less damage, it's less accurate, has worse control figures. It says it has higher hipfire stats, but when I look in the Simthic data, no such thing. The hipfire stats are the same for all the pistols. So maybe Simthic have that wrong, or maybe this bar chart has it wrong. I'm not entirely sure. But what you really are getting with the Howder pistol is that higher rate of fire, 257 against 164, or even the Gasser's 180. So it's doing revolver damage, which is 53 maximum. It's doing 15 minimum with a similar drop off to the number 3 revolver, but that 53 maximum with the much higher rate of fire means you really can put out quite a lot of damage at close range in an emergency. It only has 4 bullets, but it reloads 2 at a time, so it's not a bad reload rate. So yeah, you are trading off max damage at close range against worse accuracy and recoil stats. So finally, I'm going to talk about the class spammer, what I call the spammer in each class. For the assault, it's the 1903 hammerless, and this compares most directly to the MLE 1903 that's common across all the classes. So I'm going to compare that there, let you know the differences. So what you can see from the charts over there on the right is that the damage drop-off is slightly worse, drops off slightly earlier, but it doesn't drop as far, but the damage they still consider to be worse, and the control rating is better. The rate of fire is considerably more, 450 against 360 there, and you got one more bullet. In the underlying Simthic data, the way it compares is the maximum damage is 26.5, the minimum is 13.5, so it does actually drop to the same damage. I'm not quite sure why it shows it differently there in the chart over on the right. So they both drop to 13.5 at distance. 26.5 is the lowest damage close up, but the rate of fire is considerably more, so the time to kill will probably be less still, especially with one extra bullet. You're doing very well with damage output. Also, comparatively, the muzzle velocity is slightly less, but still not bad, still not as slow as, say, a revolver. The deploy time is good. The reload time is actually fast, so it's fast in that regard as well. And the recoil is low. The recoil characteristics are low, similar to the MLE 1903, and aiming characteristics very similar also. So basically you're getting an even more rate of fire, slightly less damage, but because of that rate of fire it's actually probably more damage, slightly more drop off, so it's even more of a close range emergency weapon. So just to quickly summarize for the assault, because we'll see a similar pattern in the other classes, the common weapons there sort of run from the revolver, damage wise and speed wise, higher damage, lower speed with the revolver, through the M11, the P08, the MLE 1903 and the C93, so that it gets less and less damage but better and better accuracy and speed. And then we'll have a comparison pistol, each class has one, a special and a spammer. So moving on to the medic. First up, we're going to compare the auto revolver to the number 3, and you can see the slightly more damage, slightly less accurate. The rate of fire is increased even more than the Gasser there, and the special thing about the auto revolver is it gives you these advantages, but it still has a fast reload. It reloads all 6 bullets no matter how many you use, and it doesn't throw away the ones that you haven't used. It has that magical bullet retention without a lack of loading speed. So next we're going to talk about the medic special, which is the C96. This most closely compares, I think, to the C93. It's not quite as fast, but it's just as accurate, but it's doing more damage and has one more bullet than the C93. The only other difference there is the reloading is a little bit odd. If you use all your 10 bullets, then it reloads the whole strip in one. If you use less than 10, then it reloads what looks like one at a time, but it actually loads 2 for every single bullet animation, so it's not quite as slow as you think it is. And lastly, for the medic, we're talking about the Taschen Pistola M1914. This is the spammer for the medic class, and like the others, it has a much higher rate of fire, less damage, but the high rate of fire still gives it a good damage output, and it compares to the MLE 1903 just as you'd expect. Slightly less damage, slightly better control figures, and faster. So next up we have the support and their sidearms, and to follow the pattern we're going to talk about the Bulldog revolver to begin with. And you can see in the comparison with the number 3 it has a high rate of fire. That's a very high rate of fire for a revolver, the fastest of the revolvers, and it says its damage is reduced over here in the charts, but statistically underlying it has the same minimum and maximum as the number 3, so I'm not quite sure what DICE are doing to come up with their less damage there, but basically with that rate of fire the damage outlay from the Bulldog is much bigger than the number 3. The accuracy is reduced, that's aiming down the sights though, you won't be doing that an awful lot. So on the whole, yeah, the Bulldog is fast outlay of damage compared with the number 3. But it is one of those slow loaders, I'm afraid. One bullet at a time and quite slowly done. So next up is the special for the support class, which is the Repetia Pistola 1912. I'm really not sure if I've pronounced that right, but it'll do. And this, very similar to the C96, is comparable to the C93. You can see there Repeater pistol is doing slightly more damage for slightly less in the control characteristics, which comes from having slightly worse vertical recoil, I believe. In a similar way to the C96 also, it has a strip bullet reload, but it doesn't have that single or double bullet reload. If you fire just a few bullets and then reload, it ejects the spare bullets and then puts another strip in. It's a bit of an odd reload and a little bit slow, but not too terrible. And last but not least, for the support, we have the Modelo 1915 here, which is of course the spam fire rapid fire version for support, and very much like the other spam firers, it's doing less damage but has better control characteristics and fires much faster. So our last class to talk about is the Scout class, and their sidearms start with the Bodeo compared to the number 3. So the Bodeo is the Scout revolver. What you get for the Bodeo is greater damage, better accuracy, a better rate of fire, but it has that slow 1 round at a time reload. You can see the damage drop off is not for a few meters as well, and if I compare the Synthic data, yeah, you can see damage is all round better. The drop off is a few meters later. It's got that 53 maximum, but it's also got a 17.5 minimum compared to the number 3 with 13.5. So next up we have the Scout Special, which is the Mars Automatic, and look at that big thing. This is a kind of a crossover between the M1911, a semi-automatic clip loader, and the revolvers, really, for its damage. It does 40 maximum damage as compared to the revolver's 53 and the M1911's 35. It has 23 minimum damage, which is the highest minimum damage, though. So I suppose it's in keeping with the Scout class itself. Its distance capabilities are much more impressive than other handguns. It's got a 530 meters per second muzzle velocity as well, so again, distance doesn't have as much problem with leading targets with bullet drop. Magazine size is 11, which is also impressive, and it compares well with aiming down the sights as well to the other pistols. So a real big hitter for the sniper's sidearm. And lastly, for the Scout is its spammer, the From a Stop. It really has very similar characteristics to the other spam rapid fire pistols. Reduction in range stability, reduction in damage in exchange for better recoil and accuracy and much higher rate of fire. The only other thing to note, I suppose, are these Hellfighter versions of the 1911, which came with Special Edition, Digital Deluxe, I can't remember, and the Red Baron's P08. These are effectively just reskins. There's nothing special about them, though when you look at the P08 and compare, something odd there. It seems to have worse control characteristics, and the damage drop-off is the same, but if I pick the Red Baron's P08 and compare with that P08, the damage drop-off chart changes. Seems a little buggy to me. I think they're just both reskins. So that is Sidearms for the classes. Leave me a thumbs up if you liked this video, thumbs down if you feel you must, but please leave comments. I like to hear from you guys, especially if you make videos yourself and have some constructive criticisms to make. That'd be awesome. Thanks very much, YouTubers. See you next time.